There are wounds that don't bleed. No one sees them. No one asks about them. Yet they hurt every single day. The wound of feeling overlooked. The wound of feeling left behind. The wound of watching everyone else receive the very things you've been praying for. Love, success, progress, while your own life feels stuck. This is the story of Elsa, a woman who spent years chasing acceptance, years begging to be chosen, years trying to become everything for everyone else, until one day she discovered that the very thing she was searching for from people could only be found in God. But before she discovered that truth, life had to bring her to a breaking point. And trust me, that breaking point was painful. It was 11:53 p.m. She should have been asleep. Instead, she was scrolling. Again. Another wedding announcement. Another engagement photo shoot. Another luxury vacation. Another friend celebrating a promotion. Another entrepreneur announcing record sales. Elsa paused on a picture. It was a girl she had gone to university with. The caption read, "God did it! Finally picked up my dream car today." Hundreds of comments. Thousands of likes. Elsa stared at the image longer than she intended. Then she whispered quietly, "She's younger than me." A few seconds later, she clicked on another profile. Married. 2 children. Beautiful home. Thriving business. Happy family photos. Then another profile. Another success story. And another. And another. Each picture felt like evidence. Evidence that everyone else's life was moving forward, except hers. The room became silent, but her thoughts didn't. They never did. What's wrong with me? Why does everything seem harder for me? When will it be my turn? Tears formed in her eyes. Not because she wasn't happy for other people, but because she couldn't understand why her own life felt so different. What social media never showed was that Elsa had spent the entire week worrying about money. Again. 3 years earlier, Elsa had launched an online luxury thrift store. She was excited, passionate, hopeful. She loved fashion. She loved helping women feel confident, and she genuinely believed it would work. At first, she imagined success, thousands of followers, steady customers, financial freedom, a growing brand. But reality looked very different. Most days, she worked alone. She sourced the clothes herself, photographed them herself, edited the pictures herself, created marketing posts herself, responded to customers herself, packed orders herself. Everything was her responsibility. One Saturday evening, she spent hours creating content. Hours. She finally uploaded the collection. Then waited. And waited. And waited. 1 like. Then 2. A few inquiries. No sales. By midnight, she refreshed the page. Nothing. She refreshed it again. Still nothing. A heat rose inside her. She wanted to say out loud what she had been swallowing for months. But the anger didn't stay. It dissolved into disappointment. Stacks of inventory surrounded her. Money sitting in products that weren't moving. Shortly after, 3 messages appeared. Her heart raced. Potential customers. Finally. The first message? "Hi, is this available?" She responded immediately. No reply. The second? "Can you reduce the price?" After negotiating for nearly an hour, the customer disappeared. The third customer reserved 4 items. Promised payment, never returned. She felt exhausted. Not physically, emotionally. Because every disappointment felt personal. Every failed sale felt like rejection, and she was already dealing with enough rejection elsewhere. Then she whispered softly, "God, what am I doing wrong?" No answer, just silence. And then there was Ben. For nearly 2 years, Elsa had convinced herself that if she loved him enough, eventually he would love her the same way. But reality told a different story. One evening, she sat at her dining table. She had planned a date night with Ben. She held a small gift box. Inside was a watch. Nothing extravagant, just something thoughtful. Ben had mentioned months earlier that he needed one. She remembered, because Elsa remembered everything. Birthdays, conversations, preferences, dreams. The little details. She always remembered. She waited. Ben didn't show up. She sent him a message. "Hey, are we still on for dinner tonight?" Scene. No response. Hours passed. Then she noticed a new post on social media. Ben was out with friends, laughing, watching football, completely fine. Her stomach tightened. Finally, her phone buzzed. Sorry, something came up. That was it. No explanation, no effort, no apology. Elsa stared at the screen. Part of her wanted to confront him, but instead, she did what she always did. She excused his behavior. Again. Maybe he was stressed. Maybe she was expecting too much. But deep down, she knew the truth. She was investing far more into the relationship than he was, and she knew it wasn't healthy. Yet, she stayed. Because somewhere inside her was a little girl who believed she had to earn love. Then, there was Vivian, her best friend. Or, at least, the person Elsa thought was her best friend. Whenever Vivian had a problem, Elsa's phone rang. "Elsa, can I borrow some money? Elsa, can you help me move? Elsa, can you come with me? Elsa, I need someone to talk to." And Elsa always showed up, even when she was tired, even when she was busy, even when she didn't have the money. 1 month was particularly difficult. Business was slow. Bills were piling up. Her account balance barely covered her needs. Then Vivian called. "Please help me. I'll pay you back next week." Elsa hesitated. She genuinely didn't have enough. Yet somehow, she still transferred the money. After all, that's what good friends do, right? The following week, Elsa needed help. Nothing major, just someone to accompany her to a supplier. She called Vivian. No answer. Called again. Nothing. Hours later, she received a text. "Sorry. Busy." That evening, Elsa opened Instagram. There was Vivian, smiling, laughing, at brunch with friends. The caption read, "My favorite people." Then another post, "Best friends forever." Elsa wasn't in any of the pictures. She wasn't tagged. She wasn't mentioned. And suddenly, something inside her broke. Not because Vivian had other friends, but because Elsa realized something painful. She was constantly showing up for people who would never show up for her. One night, Elsa sat alone in her apartment. The room was quiet. Her thoughts weren't. For the first time, she began noticing a pattern. Ben only reached out when it was convenient. Vivian only reached out when she needed something. Customers only reached out when they wanted discounts. Yet she kept giving and giving and giving. Why? Because she was afraid. Afraid people would leave. Afraid people wouldn't like her. Afraid of disappointing others. Afraid of being alone. So she became whatever people needed. The supportive girlfriend, the dependable friend, the understanding business owner, the helper, the rescuer, the peacemaker. Everyone received the best of Elsa, except Elsa. She was always last on her own priority list. And that realization hurt, because it was true. Then came her 30th birthday, the day that exposed everything. For weeks, she secretly hoped it would be different. Maybe Ben would surprise her. Maybe Vivian would plan something. Maybe she'd feel loved. Maybe she'd feel celebrated. Instead, she spent most of the day alone. Ben sent a short message hours after midnight. Happy birthday. Nothing else. Vivian called briefly, then rushed off to another engagement. The day passed. Quietly. Painfully. Ordinarily. That night, Elsa sat alone with a small cupcake she bought herself. One candle. One wish. One prayer. As tears rolled down her face, she whispered, "God." Her voice cracked. "I don't understand. I try so hard. I help people. I support people. I show up for people. So why do I always feel forgotten?" The tears came harder. Years of disappointment. Years of rejection. Years of comparison. Years of loneliness. All pouring out at once. Then she asked the question she had been carrying for years. Why am I here? And for the first time in a long time, she wasn't asking casually. She genuinely wanted to know. Because at that moment, Elsa felt completely lost. She didn't know it yet, but that question would become the beginning of everything. Because sometimes God doesn't start transforming your life until you finally become honest about how broken you feel. And what happened next would completely change the trajectory of Elsa's life. Because before God could show Elsa her purpose, he first had to show her who she was. The morning after her birthday felt strange. Nothing had changed. Her account balance was still low. The thrift store still wasn't growing. Ben was still distant. Vivian was still inconsistent. Yet something inside Elsa felt different. Not better, just tired. A different kind of tired. The kind of tired that comes when you finally run out of excuses. She stood in front of the mirror, staring at her reflection. Dark circles beneath her eyes, a forced smile she barely recognized. Then suddenly, a thought crossed her mind. When was the last time I genuinely liked myself? The question startled her. She had spent so much time worrying about whether other people liked her that she had never stopped to ask whether she liked herself. The answer was painful. She didn't. Not really. She tolerated herself, criticized herself, compared herself, doubted herself. But she certainly didn't value herself. And that realization was the beginning of something important. A few days later, Elsa was scrolling social media again. But something unusual happened. Instead of seeing luxury lifestyles and wedding videos, different content started appearing. Videos about purpose, identity, healing, faith, boundaries, personal development. One particular message caught her attention. The speaker said, "You must first learn to love, honor, and cherish yourself. How you see yourself is exactly how others will see you and treat you accordingly." Elsa stopped scrolling. The words hit her like a brick. She replayed the video, then replayed it again and again. That evening, she watched another message, then another, then another. Soon she found herself spending hours listening to teachings she would have ignored months earlier. It felt as though God was slowly answering the prayer she had cried through tears on her birthday. Not with lightning, not with an audible voice, but with truth. Several weeks later, Elsa joined an online community focused on faith and personal growth. At first, she mostly listened. People shared stories of failure, stories of rejection, stories of heartbreak, stories of rebuilding their lives. One woman spoke about leaving a relationship where she constantly begged to be loved. Elsa's eyes widened. That sounded familiar. Another man shared how comparison nearly destroyed his confidence. Another entrepreneur talked about struggling for years before finally experiencing success. Elsa sat silently listening. Then something surprised her. The people she admired weren't successful because life had been easy. They had simply refused to stay broken. They allowed God to transform them. And one statement kept appearing again and again. God changed my life when he changed the way I thought. That sentence stayed with Elsa.
The next day, Elsa bought a new journal and some books on personal development. Every evening, she began writing. At first, the pages were filled with pain. I feel forgotten. I feel behind. I feel unimportant. I don't know why my life looks like this. But eventually, her journaling changed. She began asking deeper questions. Why do I need everyone to approve of me? Why am I afraid of disappointing people? Why do I keep accepting less than I deserve? Why do I believe everyone else matters more than me? For the first time, Elsa stopped blaming circumstances and started examining herself. That wasn't easy, but it was necessary. One morning during Bible study, Elsa decided to read the story of David. She thought she already knew it. The shepherd boy, the giant killer, the king. Simple. Or so she thought. But this time, she noticed something she had never noticed before. David's own family overlooked him. When Samuel came to anoint Israel's next king, David wasn't even invited. His father presented all the other sons, not David. David was left in the field, tending sheep. Elsa stopped reading. Her heart sank because she understood what it felt like to be overlooked, to feel unseen, to feel forgotten, to feel like everyone else was more important. But then she kept reading. God rejected every other candidate, every single one, until David arrived. The overlooked shepherd became God's chosen king. Elsa stared at the page, then whispered, "People can overlook you,
and God can still choose you. The sentence echoed through her mind.
She studied further. Everyone focused on what David lacked. No armor, no military experience, no sword, no title, no status. Yet David focused on what he had: a sling, a stone, experience with God, faith, courage. Elsa closed her Bible, then looked around her room. The thrift store inventory, her laptop, her journal, her creativity, her communication skills, her compassion, her experiences. For years, she had obsessed over what she didn't have. What if she was asking the wrong question? Instead of asking, "What am I missing?" maybe she should ask, "What has God already given me?" The thought changed something. Because maybe her problem wasn't lack. Maybe it was perspective. One evening, Elsa stumbled upon a teaching comparing Saul and David. The teacher said, Saul lost his kingdom because he feared people more than he feared God. That statement grabbed her attention. She opened her Bible and began studying. The deeper she looked, the more uncomfortable she became. Saul constantly worried about public approval. David constantly pursued God's approval. Saul protected his image. David protected his relationship with God. Saul was obsessed with appearances. David was obsessed with authenticity. Then Elsa looked at her own life. The comparison was painful. She thought about Ben. How many times had she stayed silent because she feared losing him? She thought about Vivian. How many times had she said yes when she wanted to say no? She thought about social media. How much energy had she spent worrying about what others thought? Then, suddenly, she realized something. For years, she had been living like Saul. Her entire life revolved around approval. Approval from Ben. Approval from Vivian. Approval from customers. Approval from strangers. Approval from everyone. Except God. And that realization shook her. A few weeks later, Elsa sat alone with her journal. Rain tapped gently against the window. She wrote 2 names on a page: Saul, David. Then she drew a line down the middle. Under Saul, she wrote, needed validation, feared rejection, focused on appearances. Under David, she wrote, knew who he was, trusted God, walked in authenticity. Then she stared at the page for several minutes. Finally, she whispered, "Oh my God." The tears came instantly. Not tears of sadness, tears of revelation. For years, she had believed her biggest problem was money, or business, or relationships. But none of those were the root issue. The real problem was identity. She didn't know who she was. And because she didn't know who she was, she accepted treatment that reflected her insecurity. She tolerated relationships that drained her. She constantly compared herself. She minimized her gifts. She doubted her value. She abandoned herself, trying to become what everyone else wanted. And for the first time in her life, Elsa saw the truth clearly. God never created her to be small. She had simply spent years trying to become someone else. A few days later, Vivian called. "Hey girl, can you send me some money? I'll return it next week." The old Elsa would have transferred it immediately, even though business was struggling, even though she barely had enough. even though the previous loans had never been repaid. But this time was different. Elsa paused, closed her eyes, and prayed silently. Then she responded gently. "I'm sorry, Viv. I can't do that right now." Silence. Awkward silence. Then a short response. "Oh, okay." The call ended. Elsa sat frozen. Her heart was racing. She felt guilty, uncomfortable, almost selfish. But deep down, she sensed something. This wasn't selfishness. This was growth. And growth often feels uncomfortable when you've spent years abandoning your own needs. Little did Elsa know, this was only the beginning. Because the next person God would ask her to confront wasn't Vivian. It was Ben. And that conversation would change everything. A few days after setting her first boundary with Vivian, Elsa knew there was another conversation she could no longer avoid. Ben. For years, she had accepted breadcrumbs and called it love. For years, she had remained silent about things that hurt her. For years, she had convinced herself that patience would eventually change him. But she wasn't the same woman anymore. One afternoon, she invited Ben to meet her at a quiet cafe. The atmosphere felt different. Not because Ben had changed, because Elsa had. As Ben spoke casually about work and football, Elsa listened. Then finally, she interrupted. "Ben, can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Do you actually want this relationship?" Ben looked surprised. "What do you mean?" "I mean, are you intentional about us? About our future?" Silence. The silence told her more than words ever could. For the first time, Elsa didn't rush to rescue the conversation. She simply listened. Eventually, Ben admitted something he had never been honest enough to say. He liked having her around, but he wasn't willing to invest in the relationship the way she was. The old Elsa would have cried, begged, negotiated, tried harder. This Elsa simply nodded. It hurt, but clarity often hurts before it heals. As she walked away that day, tears filled her eyes. Not because she had lost Ben, but because she had finally stopped losing herself. For years, Elsa believed her biggest enemies were money, loneliness, and failure. She was wrong. Her greatest battle had always been her mind. Every morning, she began confronting the thoughts that had controlled her for years. I'm not good enough. No one will ever choose me. I always fail. I'm behind in life. Whenever those thoughts appeared, she challenged them. At first, it felt unnatural, almost fake. Some days she would stand in front of the mirror, repeating, "I am who God says I am. I am loved. I am valuable. I am a masterpiece. I am destined for greatness. I have the mind of Christ in me. Therefore, I cannot fail." Sometimes she didn't believe the words, but she kept saying them anyway, again and again and again, until eventually her mind began accepting what her heart had resisted. Slowly, her thoughts changed, and when her thoughts changed, her decisions began changing too. One day, Elsa caught herself doing something she had done for years, complaining. The business wasn't growing quickly enough, money was tight, life felt difficult. Then, suddenly, she stopped because she realized something. Every time she focused on what was wrong, she felt powerless. But
every time she focused on solutions, she felt empowered. So she developed a new habit. Whenever a problem appeared, she asked, "What can I do about this?" instead of, "Why is this happening to me?" That simple shift changed everything. She was no longer living as a victim of her circumstances. She was becoming a creator of her future. Another change seemed small at first. Every morning, the moment she got up, she would whisper, "Thank you, Jesus." Every night before sleeping, she would do the same. Some days, she thanked God for opportunities. Other days, she thanked Him for strength. Some days, all she could thank Him for was making it through another difficult day. But she did it anyway. Soon, gratitude became a lifestyle, and gratitude changed what she noticed. Instead of focusing on what she lacked, she began seeing what she already had: health, wisdom, creativity, opportunity. Her perspective was changing.
As months passed, Elsa became heavily invested in her growth. She bought books, attended trainings, listened to teachings, joined communities filled with people committed to becoming better. Some days, she felt inspired. Other days, she felt discouraged. But she never stopped. Then, one afternoon, something happened. While studying and taking notes, ideas began flowing into her mind, one after another. Design ideas, brand ideas, marketing ideas, content ideas. For years, she thought her thrift business was the problem. But suddenly, she saw something different. The problem had never been the business. The problem had been her thinking. The old Elsa looked for limitations. The new Elsa looked for possibilities. The idea wouldn't leave her alone. For weeks, she researched, planned, learned, designed study trends, studied branding, studied successful businesses. Then she launched her own clothing brand. Not because she was fearless, but because she finally believed she had something valuable to offer. This time, her motivation was different. Years earlier, she wanted success so people would admire her, so she could prove herself, so she could keep up with everyone she saw online. Now, her purpose had changed. She wanted to create confidence. She wanted women to feel beautiful. She wanted to serve people. She wanted to add value. She no longer viewed wealth as a trophy. She viewed it as a tool for impact, a tool for purpose, a tool for helping others. At first, nothing spectacular happened. Sales were slow. Growth was gradual. Progress was invisible. But Elsa remained consistent. When ideas came, she acted. When she learned something new, she implemented it. When she failed, she adjusted. When she felt discouraged, she kept going. Month after month, year after year. Then one day, something unexpected happened. She shared her story online. The story of comparison, the story of rejection, the story of identity, the story of God's evident mercy in her life. Thousands watched, then hundreds of thousands, then millions. One post changed everything. Brands began reaching out. Partnerships followed. Interviews followed. Collaborations followed. Her clothing brand gained visibility across multiple countries. But what excited her most wasn't the attention. It was the messages. People telling her, "Your story changed my life." Years earlier, Elsa believed success would finally make her valuable. Now, she understood something deeper. She was valuable before success ever arrived. Success simply revealed what had been growing inside her all along.
One evening, she sat quietly reflecting on her journey. The struggling business, the lonely birthday, Ben, Vivian, the tears, the prayers, the growth, the lessons from David, the warnings from Saul. And she smiled because she finally understood. God never creates people to be small, but many people never become the more they were created for because they spend their lives trying to become someone else or thinking less of themselves. David became great because he embraced who God created him to be. And Elsa finally did the same. She discovered her purpose. She walked in her calling. She served people. She impacted lives. She prospered.
Not because life suddenly became easy, but because she consistently became better. And perhaps the greatest lesson of all was this: whatever the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve, but only when faith is followed by action, only when growth is followed by consistency, only when purpose is followed by obedience. And that is how Elsa's life changed forever. Maybe you're watching this and you see yourself in Elsa. Maybe you're exhausted from trying to earn love. Maybe you're tired of comparing your life to everyone else's. Maybe you're struggling financially. Maybe your relationships drain more than they give. Maybe you've spent years wondering why your life isn't moving forward. Or maybe, like Elsa, you've spent so much time focusing on what's missing that you've become blind to what God has already placed within you. Remember this: God never creates people to be small, but many people never become the more they were created for because they spend their lives trying to become someone else or thinking less of themselves. The world says compare. God says embrace your uniqueness. The world says focus on what you lack. God says steward what you've been given. Elsa's life changed when she stopped asking, "Why is my life not like everyone else's?" and started asking, "Who did God create me to be?" She stopped allowing negative thoughts to define her future. She stopped seeing herself as a victim of her circumstances. She stopped focusing on what was wrong and started focusing on what she could do to make things better. And little by little, everything changed. Not overnight, not instantly, but consistently. Because transformation is built one thought, one decision, one act of faith, and one inspired action at a time. And eventually, the woman who once begged to be chosen discovered something beautiful. She had been chosen by God all along.
If Elsa's story resonated with you, we'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below. Then tell us, what's one thought or habit you're choosing to change today? If this story encouraged you, like this video and share it with someone who needs it. And subscribe to MindWorks for more stories that will help you renew your mind and live purposefully.